So today on the podcast, we have Jim Bray. He's a Canadian Motorsports Hall of Famer. He's raced in multiple Daytona 500s, a bunch of NASCAR races from the early 60s all the way up into the 70s. He's currently a team owner in the NASCAR Pinty series. He's 89 years old. He's going to be 90 in February, and he's still flying his plane and running his business. Enjoy. When did racing start for you?
Racing started in 52, yeah.
Yeah. So you bought a
rough old car from Jim Hellahan, and then we built a car that never had a contending car. The car I had, it was just an engine out of a 44 dump truck. That's what we used for power.
And it was a 34 Ford?
35, and a 34 for the first race through, then a 35 Ford.
Yep.
And actually, I still have a picture of that in my office.
And where was that?
Pinecrest Speedway,
okay.
yeah.
And yeah, again, for people who don't know, that was Toronto, or just north of the city now.
Yeah.
But you were telling me before that did you race at the CNE?
No, I never raced at the CNE,
so
but I did
downtown Toronto.
I did a lap in it when they were building it with my dump truck, because we were hauling this colas mix in, which didn't work out well. So after the first few races, they repaved it with hot asphalt. So you could race Tuesdays and Fridays at the CNE, and Wednesday and Saturday at Pinecrest. You could race 4 nights a week, and if you lived in the west suburbs of Toronto, the long haul would have been to Pinecrest, like half an hour, 45 minutes. And I didn't realize that at the time I was in the trucking business, I should have just forgot about the trucking and gone racing, because a $500 car would be a top contending car.
Right.
And
what would it pay to win?
While at Pinecrest, it paid, they had 3 heats and 2 consies. They paid 40, 30, 20, and 10.
Okay.
And then the feature paid $100 down to $10, I think, for 10th finish. But you had to finish.
Right.
Now, the CNE paid, because they had huge crowds. So the CNE paid probably twice as much. You had to have more car and a little tougher competition. And the CNE, they were affiliated with NASCAR.
Right.
So
and what year was this when they were running the CNE?
52.
Okay.
And people say there was only one Grand National Cup race in Toronto in 1958, but they raced every year, and a couple of times twice a year from 52 on. But it was the NASCAR Grand National Short Track division.
Right.
They had 2 divisions, and so it was you could make a living in those days, like say $500-600 for a car. Then, and you tried to make $40 a day gross with your truck. While if you won a heat or a consi at Pinecrest, you got $40.
Wow.
You just bought a drum of fuel for $1,100 for the last race.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Okay. $3 would buy the gas to take you to the track and home, and gas for the race car for the night.
Wow.
And no back gate.
So did you see the economics of it at the time?
I didn't at the time.
Okay.
No, never. It didn't at the time.
So you just loved racing?
Well, we just you wanted to race. Yeah.
Right.
So I raced off and on from there till a couple of years I didn't race at all, and then I went into the car business, and I did pretty well in the car business as a car salesman. So I was going to buy another race car. And I was talking to Howard Purdy. He had a modified he was going to sell, and with coincidentally an engine in it that was in the first Grand National car, convertible car that I bought that I didn't race. And but he wanted a couple of $1,000, I think, for it or something like that. And I could buy a Sprite, a 58 stock Sprite sports car for the same money. So I thought that the supers were not safe enough, so I bought this Sprite and raced it 4 or 5 times. But sports cars didn't pay any money.
Right.
So I was in the first official race at Mosport.
Which was a USAC event.
Well, no, the first official race in sports cars in 61.
61.
Yeah.
So you were in that race.
Yeah, I was in I was in the first race, which was the race for Class H and so on. They ran a whole bunch of races that
Okay, not the one that Heimrath won.
no, Heimrath didn't win it. Sterling Moss won it.
Sterling Moss won. Oh, Heimrath was just in it.
He might have been in it,
Okay,
I guess. Yeah. But, and I can remember standing in line, and I'd bought, because I was raising sports cars, I bought might have been Cooper or Dunlop, I forget which, a driving uniform that somebody in Clarkson was selling, and that's what Moss was wearing. So I remember standing in line to get a hamburger, and I see this guy a little bit ahead of me. He's got the same kind of driving suit. I wonder where he bought it, and black curly hair.
Yeah.
And then it was Moss standing in line to
get a hamburger before the race.
Yeah. He didn't ask for anything special. And then when we were practicing, everybody practiced together. Here I am with a Sprite. The fastest spot of the racetrack with a stock Sprite, was turn 4. Because you go downhill. You go 100 miles an hour going downhill. And I see Moss in my mirror. So as you come up over to the right-hand corner for turn 5, I just stayed a little bit wide, and he went by and gave me the famous Moss wave.
Yep.
He did it. He either gave you the wave for thanks a lot, or he gave you the wave, I'm better than you, I just passed you, depending on what the situation was.
Certainly.
He was famous for that. But
so what? When?
Then the next year when I got the next year, my best friend in racing is a guy called Rex White. He's the oldest national champion in auto racing still alive, and he's 92, I guess, or 3, and he was the national champion in 1960.
Okay.
And
national champion of what?
NASCAR.
Okay.
Grand National.
Okay. Yeah.
And then the next year he was second to Ned Jarrett, and he got Ned Jarrett his ride, and Ned won 1 race and Rex won 6, but they had different points for big races in those days, so he didn't win the championship. But anyhow, so I bought this 60 Ford, and I, as you probably know, I still have the car. Fletcher did a bit of work on the chassis when we were rebuilding it. Not a replica.
Yep.
The actual car. I have that restored now. That finished 9th in the first World 600, and it led 11 laps, I think it was, in the first fall race at Charlotte.
Okay.
Larry Frank was driving it.
And you were the owner at the time, or no?
I bought it, and
so what was the mindset to go become a team owner or buy a Busch? It was a Busch car.
It was a Cup car. They had sportsmen and modifieds, and that sometimes they had a modified sportsman race, was for modifieds and sportsmen together, with a little separate purse, and then the Grand National, and being a car salesman, you work every night and so on. I thought, I can't run local races at all. If you're going to run locally, you got to run a lot,
right?
And you got to try to run up front. If you're running Grand National, to me, it's like if you're playing hockey on a Thursday night and you're on the ice a lot and you do pretty well, or you American League or in the NHL and you sit on the bench most of the time. Which would you rather do? I think I would just as soon play in the NHL and sit on the bench as being a goal scorer on Wednesday and Thursday nights.
Got it.
So that's what I did, and so I ran the car in some USAC races and some Mark, which became ARCA, some midweights, and then I took the car to Daytona for the modified sportsman race. It was a sportsman car. Most of the cars were modifieds. I was the second fastest sportsman with, I think, 8 laps of practice on 3-year-old tires. Okay. And the fastest guy, I didn't realize, it wouldn't have mattered. I could have easily picked up a mile an hour, and that would have made me the sportsman record holder, as it was. Rainey Charland, who practiced for a week, he was a mile an hour quicker than I was, but I was the stock. And that car, when I got it, and I took it to Atlanta to get it inspected the year before, and you had to pull the heads off and check your deck height. So they said, your car's not legal. What do you mean? And I had a receipt from the people I bought it from saying the car was legal and so on. And so I went to the guy that had built the car. He was working for a battery company then, and he said, "Didn't they tell you what cylinder to check?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, I took 20,000 off the block, so then I took 20,000 off the top of one piston." So he said, you checked that piston, the deck clearance was okay. He said, where's the carburetor? I said, you've got another problem.
Oh boy.
So anyhow, that was at Atlanta. But
So you didn't get to run that race?
Yeah, well, they got rained out.
Okay.
So then I flat towed it to Richmond, and then 2 weeks later, and it got rained out again. Then the week after that, they run in Richmond.
And what do you mean flat towed it? Like on a straight bar?
Towed it with a bar with a car with my demonstrator. Yeah.
So you literally
everybody did. Everybody.
Really?
If you look at 1961, there's a picture of Nelson Stacy who he won the 1961. I think it was World 600 or Southern 500, one or the other, shows the car, and you can see the brackets on the front bumper for hooking the tow bar on.
Wow.
Holman Moody flat-towed forever.
Yeah.
And I flat-towed to California with the car I bought from Rex.
Here, from Ontario?
Well, from Spartanburg, South Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah. So I go to Daytona, and I advertised it in the National Speed Sport News, a monthly paper that I wanted to sell the car. A guy from a place called Kite, Georgia, called me and said he's interested in the car. So I paid $2,000 for it and ran it a year and sold it to him for $1,100. And then he gave me the remains back 20 years later, and then 20 years after that we rebuilt it. But anyhow, to try to get a little, you don't know what you're doing, as far as speed, because there was a lot of cars there.
Right.
So I wanted to make the race. So I thought maybe it get a little more speed. I took the fan off.
Okay.
So then we went out to qualify, and I ran 144.3, which is okay.
And what track was this at?
At Daytona.
Okay.
And like I say, I was second fastest sportsman, but 30th, I think, overall.
Right.
So I forgot to put the fan on. Biederman came down by bus, and then I got him in the pits with me, or in the garage here, and he helped me. But forgot to put the fan back on. So you go out to start the race, you're sitting on pit road forever, the engine running and so on,
Yeah.
and it got hot. So I tried cooling it down. The race, it wouldn't cool it. So I finally parked it. So
And what year was that?
That was 63.
Okay.
So then I took it up the next day to the guy in Georgia and sold it to him.
Yep.
And 20 years later, my son and I were going south, and I wonder how Michon's doing. So we went over to a guy called Michon Townsend, and we went over to see him. And the remains of the car was laying out by his barn.
No way.
So he's, I'll give it to you. So he gave it to me. So then the next year we went down and I bought the floater and the front hubs and covers off him. And then 20 years later, my son had a lot to do with it, but the way he phrased it, we got to get this car rebuilt while you're still alive.
Yeah.
So I know how to do it right.
Yeah.
The car is very nice.
Right on.
Very nice, yeah. Jack Roach, when he saw it, he loved it. In fact, somebody said to me, "Did Jack Roach buy that car off you?" I said, "What are you talking about? The car's not for sale." How do you know? Oh, he said, this is a guy with Childress, his engine builder. He said, people in NASCAR know everybody's business. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So...
So did you, that was, sorry, you said 62 or 63?
63 at Daytona.
And you raced it and you made the race?
Well, yeah, and that's the car overheated, so I didn't run.
Didn't finish it.
No, I finished. I ran 100 miles, I think.
So you were just trying to do those big races?
Well, I went to in Daytona in '62. I was one of the top 50 Ford salesmen in Canada, and I won an award. They had a due for the Professional Salesmen's Club in Dearborn the same weekend as the race. So there were 49 salesmen showed up at Dearborn, and I was in Daytona racing, but luckily racing a Ford.
Yep.
Yeah. So then later on in the year, I bought a car from Rex. I should have bought a Ford because Chevrolet got outrageous. There are no spare parts, all kinds of stuff for Ford.
Right.
But anyhow, I bought the Chev, and I ran it somewhat. And then
was it one of his old cars?
His 62 Bel Air.
So it was a good car.
It was in 62, but by 63 and 4 it was
okay.
The 427 Fords were out and so on, and it was obsolete. They got obsolete very quickly in those days. So as I say, I flat towed it to. I went to. I went to Langhorne, which is a very famous 1 mile dirt track with the Ford, and then the next year in a USAC race with the Chevrolet. Because me being nobody, NASCAR and USAC, they didn't care. If I was a top guy, you couldn't go from one circuit to another. So in '63, I go, and my son, who was Danny, the guy that was born the same day as Terry, he was what would he be, like 6 years old, I guess, at the time, and he said AJ's going to be there. And I said, have you been reading my Speed Sport news? And he said, yeah. And so he said, maybe
which AJ?
Foyt.
Yeah,
the only AJ.
Yeah.
And so the race got rained out. No, not rained out, but rained and shortened. So everything's covered in mud, and I looked, and he was long gone.
Yeah.
So I'm driving up the interstate, and I reached in my pocket and pull out a piece of scrap paper, and he's got a "Don't forget about Foyt." So that was we ran a bit after that. So then in January the next year, I decided to go to Riverside.
Okay.
So Danny says, now he's 7 years old now. He said, AJ's going to be there. He's driving Banjo's car. That's Banjo Matthews. I said, you were reading my National Speed Sport news again. So I went through all my stuff, and I found an old Dominion store receipt, and on the back of it says, don't forget about Foyt. So,
and what does he mean? This was your son wrote these?
Yeah, to get a picture of him with my car, or me with his car, whatever, you know.
Get a picture for him.
Get a picture, yeah.
Okay.
So it was a kind of a tragic thing in a way. I talked to Joe Weatherly the day before the qualifying got rained out, and he normally wore saddle shoes and a pair of loafers. I said, "Where's your shoes?" He said, "My mom gives me a new pair of shoes every year for Christmas, and they were little tighties, but I'll be wearing them tomorrow." The next day, he was killed. And the national champion, two-time national champion, and leading the points again.
Oh, geez.
And when they got him out of the car, you could see the saddle shoes. But anyhow, so I found this scrap of paper. So I looked around. There was Foyt. In those days, we didn't have the internet and so on. So
cell phones,
the first thing you do is you get on the payphone and you phone home to say what happened, and I'm going such and such. So when he comes out, I told him. He said, he lied to me. He said, "We're not going to race forever." He raced forever after that. That was in 64. And he said, "We like to have things like that." So he said, "Could you put your address on there, and I'll do something rather than a picture?" I said, "Okay." So
do something for your son.
Yeah, so I gave it to him. I get home later, and I said, "I couldn't do anything." I said to my wife, I said something about our conversation, but I said, the next weekend he was racing sprint cars in Phoenix, and who knows what, with a scrap of paper. A few days later, a big brown manila envelope comes, and it was Dolliver Street in Houston, Texas, but no name.
Okay.
See, if it had his name, people in the post office would have been opening it up.
Right.
And to Danny Bray and his address and so on. So Danny comes home from school. By now he's like, 7 years old. I said, "There's mail for you." He said, "What do you mean mail for me?" He said, "What is it?" I said, It's a federal law. You can't open somebody else's mail, so you have to open the mail." "Oh, okay." So he opened it up, and it was to Danny from AJ, a picture of his '63 Indy 500 car. So Danny still has that picture, and years and years and years later, I found the envelope somewhere, and I gave him the envelope. See, he still has the envelope as well.
Oh, that's good.
And so NASCAR called me and asked me if I'd please go to Daytona for the 500. They were short of cars. I said, the cars weren't. "Please, we'll pay you starting money even if you don't make the race."
And was this, what, 64?
In 64.
Okay, yeah.
So I went, as soon as I got there, I'm walking in the garage area, and there's AJ over there. He looks over, he smiles, and said, "Everything all right?" And I said, "AJ," I said, "you were a hero to my kids before. I said, you'll be a hero for life." And I only know the good sides of AJ. He was little. He didn't suffer fools gladly, but I have the same problem. So if anybody, especially if it's news reporter, anybody's stupid, he didn't respond well. But other than that, AJ was a great, still is a great guy.
Yeah.
And
so you're thinking about these races in that they paid a decent amount of money,
well,
or I got to be in the big show?
It paid like that Riverside race. The car wasn't really competitive, but we finished, I think, 18th or something like that, 16th, 18th, somewhere in through there. Ran out of gas twice. Oh, and a guy called Nick Rampling. I don't know if you know Nick Rampling.
No.
He's a local guy. Again, another one of the guys, not a lot of education, but one of the smartest people I've ever met. And he had a body shop. He still restores old cars. And he went with me. And so rather than by me buying 2 licenses and him one, he's shown as the car owner. And which we still do that, you know. So he was with me. And the day after the race, forget the guy's name, he became president of Nascar, or Daytona, one or the other, famous football guy. He managed the Riverside track, and he walked by and he looked down and he saw the Ontario plates, and he said, you got a long way to go, haven't you? And I said, yeah. He said, well, here, this will help you. And he gave me a $50 bill. $50 at Riverside, California, paid for the gas to tow the car back to the east.
Right.
$50 would pay for the gas.
Right.
Because the gas was like 28 cents a gallon or 25 cents a gallon. You got 15 or 18 miles to the gallon. So
Yep.
it was crazy. So anyhow, so we the car had cracked. He had the Magnaflux, and the car had cracked spindles and hubs. So I had to get some stuff that didn't match. So I couldn't really run the car. So I qualified it and then ran a few laps in the qualifying race and in the 500. And it paid big money. Then $725 to start.
To start the race.
And $100 to start. So $825, which was big money in those days.
Right.
Yeah, for a car that you bought for $2,000. And then Rex sold it later, a month or so later, for me for $1,800. So it cost me $200 to own the car for a dozen races.
Right.
Dollars were different in those days.
And Rex was the champion.
Rex White is the national champion, Cup
year?
champion in 1960.
So was he still running those in those days in '64 with you?
No, he kind of, when GM got out of the racing, he got a Mercury deal through Bud Moore because they're both in Spartanburg. And you've probably heard of my reputation for upset about inaccuracies in history and stuff. So I was at the Hall of Fame deal a few years ago, and there was a guy there, and he had a car that was supposedly was Fireball Roberts' 63 and a half Cup car, or 63 and a half Cup car, and he got it from Wendell Scott. It was never a car that he drove. And I get upset about saying that. So then he says, and I've got the 63 Mercury that Parnelli Jones set the record going up Pikes Peak on Labor Day, or on July the 4th weekend in 1963. I said, oh, do you? I said, where'd you get that car? He said, from Curtis Clemens, not Clemens, Curtis Schreider, I think his name is.
Okay.
Crawfish Schreider. So I said, oh, is that right? So the other guys were all standing there in a group. I called Rex. And I said, Rex, when you sold the 63 Mercury, who did you sell it to? He said, I sold it to Curtis Schreider. I said, oh, okay, thanks a lot. I said, it's funny that it would be really difficult for Parnelli to run up Pikes Peak that day and set the track record in the car that you now have, when Rex was racing it at Daytona in the firecracker race the same day. So he looked, well, he said, be even more interesting to have a car that Rex owned. So, so I have problem with accuracies like that. That
Right.
22 car was never involved with Fireball Roberts.
Right.
But so people they appreciate in a way and they get upset in a way when I say that ain't the way it happened.
It's
so
things only happen one way. So.
Yeah. History is not a prose deal. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So during that time, they convinced you to come down and run the '64 race. Do you have aspirations to be a cup driver full time, or to make a living racing?
I had thought about it, but there's a few reasons why I didn't. First of all, I had 3 and then 4 little kids, and California would have been really the only place to go to in the States at that time. And
in what sense?
Environment
To move to, you mean?
Well, I wouldn't bring my kids up in a racist area, and the South was still, United States is still racist, but it was much more visible in those days.
I see.
And so the educational systems weren't as good, and at that time the labor rate at Holman Moody for working on race cars was $6 an hour. So mind you, if you had two guys working on the car, it was 12. But anyhow, people working in the mills and so on, they making $30 a week and stuff like that. I made that one year. I made $10,000 selling cars for a Ford dealership.
Right.
So, but it was mainly the environment of the racism and stuff like that.
In the South, you didn't want to live down there.
Yeah, and if you're going to go racing, you had to go NASCAR.
Yep.
If you went USAC, you probably wouldn't live very long because they were very dangerous.
Right.
And financially as well. But so you had to live in Spartanburg or maybe Spartanburg really at that time, or so. And I was invited to like the next year, I went down at 65. I went down to Daytona, and Bobby Johns got the Fireball Roberts ride in the Ford, and he and his dad had a Pontiac deal the previous, and then the GM got out of racing, so Shorty brought the Pontiac up, and so I helped him get it through inspection and stuff, and so I could drive it. So Bobby didn't really know me, so he checked with the guy Slick Owens, who was the parts manager at Holman Moody, and Slick said, well, he'll be careful. He doesn't wreck. All I know is he finishes and he doesn't wreck. So that was good enough for Bobby. They just want to get the car in the race anyhow. So I ran it in the 65 race, and again they just wanted to start and park, which I did, and they paid me a little bit for doing it. So Cale Yarborough said, stay down and come and stay at my place. We eat out of the garden. You don't need any money. You can ride to the race with me. You can do, or you got your car, whatever, and you'll get rides. I said, Cale, I got mortgages and bills at home. I got to get home. Well, he said, I'm telling you, you get away and they'll forget about you. You have to be at the track. You're at the track and somebody will need a driver. And I said, I didn't do anything. He said, you drove Bobby and Shorty John's car in the Daytona 500. You can't get any better recommendation than that. So he said, but I didn't do it. So I went home, and then I had a beef with the manager that I was working for in the car dealership at that time, and I quit. And so I drove down. I thought, well, maybe I will go and see if I can do something. So I drove down to Bristol, and just as I was getting to the track, the haulers were coming out the other way. I thought, what's going on? So the track, they had a storm, and part of the track had got washed out. So they postponed the race for 2 or 3 months. So I just turned around and went back home, and I never did bother to do that again.
Wow.
But there was
so
a guy.
you were on your way down, and you went to Bristol.
And it got rained out.
To go try and
go
get a
out
ride.
See if I get a ride. Yeah. And or at least be seen, and then the rides will, like Cale said, rides will happen.
Yep.
But prior to that, in '57, I one of the best drivers I've ever known, and he's still alive. He's in his 90s. Billy Rafter from just outside of Niagara Falls. He had a Dodge, and then a Ford Grand National car, and he'd cut the top off the Dodge and ran the convertible races. And there was a convertible race at Richmond in '57, so I went with him there, and Glenn Wood was there with his '56 Ford convertible by himself, and his clutch was start slipping. So I helped him jack it up and put the clutch in, and then he won the race. So he told his family about that. So years later, one of the current Wood brothers came out. He said, "You helped Daddy in '57 at race?" I said, "Yeah." How would you know? He said, we were talking one time at dinner. He mentioned about this race and that race, and he mentioned about you. And so I was good friends with the Wood brothers, and then the current Wood brothers, I still am, and they introduced me to Edsel Ford, who I have a relationship with. And, and through racing a relationship of sorts with Roger Penske, and you meet a lot of great people, as you know, in racing.
Yeah.
And you and your dad, because you do a lot more than just the Pinty series. You're racing the sports car stuff, and you meet a lot of interesting people and great people. And as long as, like, I never went there like I'm a big time, I'm going to show you guys or something. I went with respect, so they treated me the same way. In fact, later on, Glenn Wood had, Glenn's name has two N's, and it's always spelled with one, and that I correct. So
Stickler.
Yeah, so I'm a good friends with the family, and Glenn cut his hand cutting with a lawnmower once, and it took quite a while to heal because he was diabetic and he had a bad hip, and he got almost to the point where he really could hardly even get around with crutches, and I was encouraging him to get your hip.
Yep.
And so I said, yeah, look, I'm walking fine. I've had both hips replaced. So, or maybe just one at the time, I forget. Anyhow, he finally did it, and a year later he was walking around fine. Right. So every once in a while, Leonard or one of the boys would say, really thank you for what you did, encouraging Glenn to get the hip.
Yeah.
So so then when they won the there's all kinds of stories from this. When they won the Daytona 500 a few years ago with the young kid driving.
With Bain.
Bain, yeah. And who Buddy Baker always called him Baines. He added an S. My son Bob, he went to the victory lane. He was opened the gate for them to all get in.
Yeah.
And I went over to the hauler while Glenn's wife was there, and so I was talking to her, and she was getting phone calls and people coming over. So finally, all the Ford people, Edsel and the Wood brothers, and the current Wood brothers as well, and a guy by the name of Allison, he was head of Ford Racing at the time. They all come, and they're down by the end of the hall, and I'm up with Glenn's wife. And Glenn says, that fella down there helped me change my clutch in my car at the Richmond in 1957. And I said, they all looked up. I said, Glenn, you didn't tell him the rest of the story. What's the rest of the story? I said, it was a convertible race and he won the race. And a lot of people don't realize that Ford, through another guy, Ford gave him a 56 convertible to race, and it was a great car that Fireball Roberts had run with the number 22 on it, which was Fireball's number. So Glenn ran the same. But then when they go to a race when Fireball was there, they'd have to put a 1 in front of the other two because they finally got fed up with that and just said, we'll just keep running the 21. So that's how they got the 21 number.
So that's how the Wood brothers run the 21 number.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. All these little stories that you come up with, from being around a long time.
Maybe you got to make a phone call to him because I think, if I'm remembering correctly, my brother calls, I forget who it is, but at the Wood brothers every once in a while about trying to get some Goodyears, some Blue Dot Goodyears because that's what they ran.
They don't have any.
Okay, so Ryan's trying to restore Cobras, and he's looking for original Goodyear tires.
Yeah, they don't have any. Because I'll tell you, when we restored our car, and they have reproduced some cars. Okay. And there's a company called Kannapolis Caps in Kannapolis, North Carolina. We used to run retreads. In fact, when Wendell Scott won his only race, Wendell told he got a kick out of it that he ran recaps on Goodyear casings, and he says Goodyear gave me money for winning the race on Goodyear tires, and they were recaps. Anyhow,
that's unbelievable.
They still have the mold for those. We didn't run slicks. They didn't run slicks in Cup till 1974 or 5.
Okay.
And no, 77 maybe. And so they have the 7-inch and 9-inch. Well, we didn't run 9-inch. We ran 7-inch. I got 7-inch caps. It cost me $800. They used to be $25 a cap. And Wood Brothers got 9-inch. So we were they said, we got the wrong ones. So then I said something a year or two later, we got the right ones now. You got the right ones initially. We now have the right ones as well.
This is on the restored car.
I know it would be on the 63.5 replica of the car that won Daytona. And I took pictures because I was racing in the sportsman race. I took pictures of the winning celebration, and the picture that they use for their their media stuff is not the one that NASCAR had. It was the picture I took.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. So we have a nice relationship with the Wood brothers.
Yeah.
They're very classy people.
Right.
And
so when did you take a hiatus after that?
well, yeah.
64
See,
season?
I didn't do anything then till 70. I didn't race at all until 70. It was 73, I guess. Les Covey was from Paris, and he raced locally, and then he raced in that series that NASCAR had with the Camaros, and which is where Childress was racing as well at that time. And then he got a very uncompetitive Cup car, and he ran it for a year, hardly made any races, and then his son had some physical problems, and the best place for it was in St. Pete's area in Florida. So he moved down there. Yeah. So his wife's family had a very famous kitchen called Calico Kitchen in Paris. But anyhow, so he moved down there. So I bought everything. I bought his car, complete, gears, truck, welder, everything he had. And so I went back again with a non-competitive car in 73 and 74, and I didn't run it much in 73, and then in 74 I went to Daytona with it, but they had I had an engine problem on the truck going down, so they were starting 43 cars and they had, I think, 63. Wow. So I didn't make the race, and but I ran both the Dover races, blew the engine in the last. It was the last race I ran, was the second Dover race, and ran Michigan, the first Talladega race, the first Pocono race, the first NASCAR Pocono race. I was in it, and like last month, broke the panhard bar. I didn't break the panhard bar. It came out. The welding came out of the frame. Yep. So I was first or second car out of the race. But that was the first NASCAR race at Pocono. Was it intimidating going down to some of those big tracks? No, big tracks are better. Okay. Oh yeah. If you're running on a small track, you get waxed pretty good. Well, you're in the way all the time. Yep. You know. So. But on the big tracks, you just run your own. Even at Dover, two things with Richard Petty, stories with Richard Petty. One was I see him coming, so I'm watching, so I'm waiting for him to go by me. All of a sudden, he goes by me underneath me, and the exhaust is like, you know. So I said to him after the race, I said, Richard, I said, you shook me up there coming off turn 4. I said, he said, I figured you were going around the outside like you would. And you went on, he said, I got a good bite coming off 4. And he said, I went underneath you. And he said, I know that you're not going to move. You know, because the one thing they teach you is don't try to get out of the way. Yep. Run your line. Yep. And then the guy passing you will decide whether you're going to go high or low. Absolutely. But like if you decide I'm going to drop down and he's already decided, you know, it wouldn't work out well. Right. Yeah. The other thing was that after that race, my son goes. They just had showers like in a local hockey rink today, and didn't have the facilities of today. And John was in there and have a shower, getting cleaned up to get ready to drive home all night. And Richard's there, and Richard turns to John. He said, he said, without race fans, we don't have races. He said, I will stay and sign autographs forever. But he said, when a man follows me into the shower, wants an autograph, I draw the line. So no kidding. The guy, he was having a shower, and the guy reached in, said, will you sign it? Jeez. That's a Richard Petty story. Yeah, well, I guess you got to draw the line somewhere. Yeah. The other Richard Petty story, that Richard tells a story that he heard from me, but he tells it wrong. Oh. Again, his first Cup race was at the CNE. And like I said, they had the short track division, but this was a full sanctioned Grand National race, and it was his first race. He'd run a convertible race a few days before. He just turned 21. So my friend Rex, he led the race for the first, and they say there's never been an oval track race in NASCAR in the rain. That race started in the rain because the guy said
in
to
Toronto.
me, it says rain or shine. He said they weren't kidding. I said no, they're not kidding. Very light rain. So anyhow, so Rex spun, and so he's back a ways, and Lee then is leading the race in an Oldsmobile, and Cotton Owens is trying to get around him in a big Pontiac, and they come on, and Cotton's getting by him, and they catch Richard, and only he was called Dick then, and for a while, and so Lee puts Richard into the wall, and that way Cotton's got to drop back, and then Lee went on to win the race. So after the race, I said to Lee, I said, "You're kind of rough on your kid in his first race, aren't you?" He said, "If he's gonna be a race car driver, he needs to watch and stay out of the way if somebody's coming up to the lap." And I said, "Yeah, or win a race whatever way you can, even if it means wrecking your own son."
Yep.
And he just gave me a look and turned and walked away. Now, Richard never heard that story till I told it once in a group that he was at, and now he tells the story, only the way he says it is Cotton was leading the race and Daddy was trying to get by him. Cotton never led the race.
Okay.
but he tells that
correction.
story. He tells that story now, but he never heard it until he heard me. He was aware of what happened,
Sure,
but he never
yeah.
thought about it as a story till he heard me tell the story. So
Right.
these things go. It's interesting. You meet a lot of interesting deals, you know.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So you're running in 73 or 74 in that uncompetitive car.
Yeah, and so then at the end of the race, at the end of the year, it was a 72, so it'd be too old to run the next year anyhow.
Right.
And I believe it's McDonald's Tobacco. They sponsored the series in Ontario, a late model series, and they sponsored the series out west. They had an ex-Petty car as the pace car here. They wanted an ex-Grand National or Cup car out west. So they bought the car from me.
Okay.
And I took it to a paint shop in North Toronto, and they painted it their colors and so on. And I just put a rebuilt engine in it after we'd blown the engine. And so I said to the guy that came to pick it up, I said, "Now look, it's got water in it." So I said, when you leave, when you maybe go to Barry or for supper or something, stop and drain the water, go to a Canadian Tire and get a jug of or two of antifreeze and put it in it and just fire it up and let it run for a minute, inshallah, you'll be fine. Years later, when we were running in Pinty series, I think I met a guy and he said I've still got the hood off that car, or the trunk, one or the other, off that car. He said, when they changed the body on it, I said, "Oh, is that right?" And I said, "Yeah." I said something. He said, "Yeah, they used just an old 283 with a 3-speed transmission in it for." I said, "What happened to the?" Oh, he said, "When the car got out west, the block and the radiator were cracked."
They didn't drain it.
The guy never drained it. Yeah.
So
that was the end until I deal with Fletcher.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the deal with Fletcher so John, who's my crew chief, had a deal and got
Lost
a deal
the
together.
deal.
Yeah, to run a full season of CASCAR and lost the sponsor.
That's right.
And was selling the CASCAR in 97 or 98.
Yeah. Well, I said I would buy it because I said, "You're too good a racer to be not racing." So I said, "Don't do it." I said, "No. I did it anyhow."
So you bought the car from him.
I bought the car,
Okay.
and
now you're a team owner in the CASCAR series.
Yeah, then I had to rent the engine from what they call the guy that he went down south with Roush, cousin. I'll remember the name of the man. And I rented the engine off him.
Yep.
And a couple of gears. So then when he came back up for Christmas, and I bought the engine, I said, "Don't I get a discount for?" I give him $1,000 a race, I think.
Yep.
No.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I bought the engine from him, and then we ran some.
What inspired you to become a team owner in the Cascar series?
Because I could afford it.
Okay. Okay. And just the love for the sport.
Well, yeah, and I thought it might have worked out okay financially, which it didn't. But,
right.
So then I ran it for a few years, and then we stopped running it for a couple of years, and then through my trailer business, and through Fletcher as well, I knew Neil Fair, and Neil had got a good racing. He was going to sell it. Same deal as I did the other time. I bought his car, gears, pit cart, and everything. So it's funny on the pit cart because I know, which I still have. I was told it was the first pit cart that Danny from Nitro built, and who does all the NASCAR specialty stuff now and builds these $100,000 pit carts.
Yep.
So I'd heard it was his pit cart. So the first one he ever built. So I said to him, I said, why don't I bring down the first pit cart you ever built and trade you, and you give me a new one? I said, for nostalgic, your first pit cart. He said, I'm not that nostalgic.
Yep.
So I still have it. But anyhow, Cherry's husband, what's his name in the NASCAR?
Sammy.
Yeah. I was talking to him last week, and so he was talking about all the guys that went down south, and he said, I was just married with a new baby. I couldn't go, but he said, and then he said something about, and about Danny. He said, the first pit cart he ever built, he built for us for John Gaunt. And I said, well, I think the first pit cart that I have the first pit cart, and it was Neil Fair's. He said, that's right. He said, Neil bought it from John. Well, I didn't know that part of the story.
Yeah. Battling over who's got the first pit cart.
It was correct.
Yep.
Except I didn't realize that Neil didn't buy it new. He bought it from John Gaunt.
Right.
Yeah.
And so ever since then, you've been a team owner in the Pinty series.
Well, it was Canadian Tire. And then
so NASCAR.
John
for
drove,
people who don't know, NASCAR came up and bought the Cascar series in 2006.
I think that's what 6 or 7, something like that. And so it was a Dodge car, the Dodge engine, and so John drove it once for me. Then he hooked me up with Joey McComb.
Okay.
And those guys didn't know what they were doing, but they were good workers. And really good workers. So then I bought a second car. I bought a road race car from Kennington.
Yep.
And that was an experience. And so then I had the two cars, and I ran them for, and then how did it happen? I was going to have Scott was going to drive I was driving my car. I think that's how it happened. And no, maybe it was before that. Scott was driving the car, and I was keeping the car at the airport and the hangar. And Scott's wife didn't want him working on the car so much, and we were going to Mosport.
Yep.
And I said to his mom too, I said, he's never driven on a road course. We can't go to Mosport without him getting the car ready and whatever and so on. So, well, he'll be okay. I said, no, he won't. So I called Howie Scannell Jr., and Howie picked the car up and worked on it for 2 days and went and actually led a couple of laps in the car. But
so you were keeping the Canadian NASCAR. You were keeping it at the hangar.
Well, I kept initially at my hangar in Guelph.
Okay.
I had a good hangar in Guelph. And so I kept the race car there, and then like I say, we parked the car for years, and then unbelievable. I fly my airplane to a couple of different places to watch Matthew Scannell drive the go-kart.
Okay.
He'd never driven a car with a windshield. So we're going to put him in my car.
Yeah, and he's a young kid at this time.
Yeah, and he'd never driven a car.
Yep.
So the shop over here, just over here on Main Street,
yep.
Kevin's shop, they were working on the cars there, and they put him in the car, in the old Cascar car, and the Fletcher car, and showed him how to drive standard transmission. So then we go, and you've got to run a race before you run in a NASCAR race. You don't, as you know,
you got to get a
approved.
license. Yeah,
you have to get approved. So we go to Mosport Oval, and get practicing. He did 2 mild spins in practice, but that's how you find out how far you can go. And he'd never driven a car at all. So he gets in the race, and he's coming off 4, and he got sideways, and he took his foot off the gas, and the car turned into the wall and stalled. But he didn't hit the wall, I don't think. Anyhow, a guy going by him hit the back end of the car and took the right side off the guy's car, the body's working, everything. So after the race, Matthew said, I said, son of a, he said, I got to go and say something to the guy. Matthew goes over to this guy, and he says, I apologize for what happened to your car. And the guy, he says, look, kid, he said, I understand this is your first race ever. He said, that's right. He said, well, he said, you were running ahead of me, and I've been racing for 10 years, so you don't need to apologize for anything.
Right.
So then we took him to Mosport and I think Kawartha for the 2 races. And then the next year, where we go to Mosport. Like I say, you talk about guys with low seat time. He had no seat time.
Yeah.
So we go to Mosport again, and I don't believe in tires in Mosport. And the guy that finished 3rd at Mosport a few weeks ago didn't change tires, right?
Yeah, no, we didn't. But we had a drive-through penalty.
I know. So you finished 3rd and didn't change tires.
Yep.
There's part of this story that's going to be a little bit whatever when we get to it.
Okay.
But so I convinced them that as soon as you know you got enough, gone far enough for fuel, get fuel.
Yep.
So they went and they got fuel.
So you're talking about the Mosport race that just happened?
No, I'm talking about when Matthew was driving the car years ago.
Yep.
So with almost no seat time.
Got it.
So this is his second race there, though. He'd run he'd run 3 or 4 races in a race car.
Yeah.
So he ran the old car at another track with the Sportsman Series and was 5th quick in qualifying. But anyhow, so we get our fuel. We don't have to stop. Everybody stops. We ended up late in the race, 16 laps to go, and we had a 23-second lead on the field.
Right.
With 16 to go.
Because everyone had taken tires but you.
Yeah, and Matthew was very smooth. I don't know how, because he had no experience. So so I just said, stay smooth, and then the fastest car. We weren't the fastest car. We were maybe 10th fastest. Well, maybe not. At the end, we were good. So I said, okay. Steckley was fastest car. I said, okay, he gained 1.25 seconds that lap. So then the next lap, he gained 1/10 that lap. So just stay smooth. He's not going to catch you.
Yep.
And if he did, whatever. So the car went off the track, and way off the track, something quit on the car. And to as old Bill France would say, we were screwing up the show. That wasn't quite the word he used, but anyhow, by having such a big lead. So they brought a caution out. So on the restart, Matthew is first and Scott's second. So they start, and then Matthew's on the outside. So Scott beat him into 2, so that put Matthew on the outside. So he stayed there. He ran second or third for 2 laps or 3 laps, and then he got spun. And the guy that spun him said, well, you were running on old tires. Well, so what? And anyhow, so he didn't hit anything, and he finished 9th. And you know who the guy was that spun him.
Oh, was it me?
I'm sitting across from him.
Oh, boy. I don't even remember that. Oh.
And you won the race.
We won the race.
And you were, I think, you were second or third, and the 2 guys screwed up on the last turn of the last lap.
Yeah.
And you got through and won the race.
Yep.
Yeah.
Got handed to me.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. I don't remember. I didn't have damage, so I must have not hit him that hard.
Oh, just enough to turn in. I forget where it was. I think it was in maybe on the last turn. Maybe, I'm not sure. I don't remember where it was. And
Oh, it's coming back to me now.
yeah.
It was corner 9.
Was it? Yeah.
I got on the inside of corner 9.
Yeah.
Wasn't expecting it. We collided.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is close to door. I think it was nose to door like this.
You're trying to make excuses.
Well, I'll
now.
take the blame now. It's been 7 years or so.
We've got over it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Matthew did do it. He went to the victory lane and he was pointing his finger at you.
Oh, I didn't see him.
Yeah. So, but that was. Luckily, we still finished 9th. But and he wouldn't have. Well, with that restart, he wouldn't have won. He might have finished in the top 5.
Yeah, had a good finish. Yeah.
But it was our deal with Scannell's with Howie Jr. ended up very unpleasantly. But when I was inducted into the Hall of Fame, and I said about all the different people I had their first rides and Mike and so on.
Yep.
And I said the one guy not with low seat time, 0 seat time, and I mentioned Matthew.
Yeah.
And they all came up. First time I've spoken to them forever.
Right.
They came up and thanked me for it. I said, hey, I have no problem with Matthew. And
yeah. So now, and you've given a lot of guys their first kind of opportunity at the Pinty Series now with Sam Fellows getting into the series.
I'll go there and then I'll go back. I've been friends of Gary Agajanian and the Agajanian family forever. I was at the 52 Indy 500 race, and they won the race.
And sorry, you're friends of who?
Gary Agajanian.
Okay.
And the Agajanian car won the 52 race with Troy Ruttman, with a dirt track car, actually, which was not uncommon in those days, and a white car with red flames, number 98. So the victory celebration was down in turn 1. So I'm 19 years old. I got to get in the garage area. So they had to push the car back from turn 1 into the garage. So they're not going to stop the car to check credentials. So I helped push the car. And as we got to the Agajanian garage, I just very slowly walked, and then I walked into the Ferrari garage. And I put a Canadian penny in the frame tube of the Formula One Ferrari that was there by the Ferrari factory team. And I thought someday they're going to tip the car, it's going to fall out, and they're going to wonder where it came from. So then 60 years later, I'm going to go back and forth there. 60 years later, I'm a lap donor. The lap donors at Indy, they used to be $100, it's $500 now. I think it's more than that since Rogers got it. And you put $500 and you get a number, and whatever that lap number is, the driver that's leading that race gets your $500.
Oh, okay.
So 60 years later, so they have a parade of the old Indy cars, and in it is a restored 98 that won the race. It's still white with red flames, and so on. So my son was with me. He took pictures of it. We have I couldn't find any pictures from the track in 52. But anyhow, he took pictures of me helping now because all the lap donors are down in turn 1, which used to be the victory area, pushing the cars back into the garage. So there I am, again, the same car, the same pusher, 60 years later, the car looking as beautiful as it did in 1952, the pusher not so much. That's the way I phrase it.
That's good.
And then Carrie, they had a story in a magazine called Speed Age in 51 about the Agajanian family and showed a picture of the family, and Carrie's there in a scout uniform. And Carrie, by the way, he's a business manager for Tony Stewart and for a lot of different people.
Okay.
And I think he was involved in the switch when Kyle went from the Chevrolet to Toyota. And anyhow, they're very big people, and he's partners with Mike Curb. Mike Curb has sponsored cars, and apparently he doesn't go to races much, but he's sponsored cars. Anytime you see a car or truck today in the top 3 series, if it's number 98, it'll be Curb.
Okay.
Probably.
Yep.
And it'll show if you read it shows he is the owner. So in my car now, Mike Curb is the owner. But anyhow, Carrie said, he said, I talked to Mike about it. He said, Mike Curb, he said, he's never dealt outside of the United States. He was the lieutenant general for the state of California when Reagan was in power.
Really?
And he was also had a group called the Curb Congregation. He's a big-time manager now for music people in Western music.
Right.
So
Curb records, yeah.
yeah. So, but he's never. And if you saw the car, the Rookie of the Year in whatever it was, 69 with Dale Earnhardt, the number 2 car, Curb records on the quarter panel.
Really?
If you see the picture of Richard Petty's car going down the backstretch at Daytona and the president's plane landing in that same picture, Curb records on the car. Huh. The last 2 races that Richard won were Curb records. It was a Curb records car. So Gary said, I've talked to him for years about you, so, and your history and so on. And so we had the car. So I had the white car. We had the 98. I put the 98 on it, and Pam went out with some vinyl and put some red flames on it, and I took a picture of it and sent it to Gary. Gary said, as soon as Mike Curb saw that picture, he said, okay, let's do a deal outside of the United States. So he's been the best sponsor I've ever had. Nothing like other people have, but still by far the best I've ever had.
Right.
By double or triple, whatever.
Yeah.
And anyhow, but not enough, but not nearly enough, but anyhow. So
it's never enough.
Well, yeah, probably. Like I said, when I was running with no sponsor, I wouldn't mind spending $25,000-$30,000 of my own money.
Sure.
If somebody was spending, with the one I had, they gave me $50,000. I don't mind spending $30,000 of my own along with theirs.
Right.
I don't like spending all of my own and nobody contributing.
Yeah.
I think your dad's probably the same way. And
oh, sure. That guy, that's the toughest guy to get you to sponsor you. That's difficult to get him to sponsor you.
Well, your dad sponsored you. It's difficult.
He sponsored me all through go-karts, and that's it. So.
Is that right?
I think I still owe him.
Yeah. Well, it's a debt could never be repaid.
Yeah.
So I got hooked up with, and you have to have the driver approved by Curb, by his lawyer in California.
Okay.
So I didn't have anything going, so I promised a girl out west a race. So she came, and I got her approved, and she came and ran Sunset, ran the double headers. Remember, we were on the double headers last year. So then I got Sam then approved because of Ron, really, and but you had to have, as you know, you have to be approved by NASCAR as a driver.
Right.
Well, he'd done a lot of stuff, sort of racing, but not really kind of racing at Mosport.
Yeah. And people who don't know, Sam Fellow is Ron Fellow's son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I bought a sportsman car, and put Sam in it for a race, and then I know the guy that approves the drivers. I talked to him and told him what he did. So now he's approved to run oval track. So we ran the other 8 races, the doublehead, finished every race. Didn't have a DNF.
Yep.
Now, except that when you looked at him, and you'd think, oh, we must have a 16th place car or something. No, we didn't. We had a 16th place driver that never wrecked.
Right.
And so then, the car, they must be getting better. The car, you got a 12th, 14th place car. No, the driver's getting experience.
Yep.
This year, we had a top 10 car.
Right.
And the last race, and we've upgraded the car. So the car, it's not the same, but as you know, you make them better all the time. And he qualified mid-pack because he's not a guy that's going to I don't know if you are either, but Fletcher certainly wasn't a guy that's going to put on a gung-ho lap for what reason.
Right.
When Fletcher drove the car, and when Sam, when Malcolm drove the car, Malcolm was a superb road racer, Malcolm Strawn. They run whatever qualifying speed you run at, you're going to run faster probably in the race.
Right.
Well, I think you do that too, don't you?
Well, to some tracks. I mean, I think you try and really put it on the line on the tracks that you can, like Mosport and the Toronto Indy, I think is pretty important to qualify well.
Yeah, because of the so-called track.
Yeah.
But
it's tough to pass.
So he qualified, I think, they had the 27 cars. I think he was 14th or 16th, somewhere in through there. He was on the outside anyhow.
Yeah.
And so we start the race, and I don't know, dude, you didn't qualify that well at some.
No, it was terrible, the last qualifying.
Yeah. So he's on the outside. Everybody trying to get to the inside. He stayed on the outside. He passed 3 or 4 cars, including Alex Labbé.
Yeah.
Now, Joel said, well, maybe Alex wasn't running good. No, Alex was running fine. He finished 6th in the race.
Yep.
But he was running great on the outside. And then there was a caution, and he did what he does almost every race. He bumped the car in front of him, and he cost us a nose every race. You know how easy it is to destroy a nose.
Oh, real easy.
But what it did, though, they think the bar across the back of the car he hit was too low or something, and it went underneath or something. Anyhow, it hit the shroud, and it buckled the shroud. It flipped it double, and then up against the radiator.
It's overheating.
So then it overheated,
Yeah.
and we were the first car out of the race.
Right.
And so it doesn't tell how. It was very, very unfortunate. But at Mosport, I've got in my truck, I've got a picture 3 wide at the finish for 9th, 10th, and 11th.
Oh, right. That was this year, yeah.
And we were 9th.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, the first DNF we had this year, we had 3, unfortunately, but the first one was, of all places, at Mosport. I think he was revving the engine up in the rain before the race. I think he got maybe he got a wheel in the water, and it spun and it broke an axle. I think that's how it broke the axle, but who knows?
Yeah, they can break.
Anyhow,
so I want to go to kind of an overview of the whole thing. You know, you've been involved in NASCAR specifically for a huge number of years. What in your eyes has been the biggest change, I guess, from you've been a team owner for a number of years, as far as team owners and kind of how people approach the sport?
Well, when I first came into it, you could do whatever you wanted to do. You didn't have to have any money. You could run. You could do whatever. And then many years later, they had the expression "start and park," and guys would come out and just get a car, and they didn't have. There were no. The word I don't like, junk cars anymore. And even the guys that run at the back, they're good cars.
Yeah.
And I mean, the team from Denver, they did start and park, and then they got a bit of sponsor. They started running a few races.
Furniture Row.
Furniture Row.
Yeah.
And then the next year, they at the first of the year, if the first 5 races, it's the cars that are in the top 35, I think it was the year before, and then after that's the maybe 30 or 35, and so they ran the first 5 and they were in the top. So now they got a guaranteed starting spot. Since this scam deal from that Bud, whatever his name is, came out with this club they got now, you could be not a franchisee and win every race, and you're still not a franchise. You still don't get the TV money. You don't get the same. They don't publish the purse anymore. So if you really want to try to get anywhere in NASCAR now, it probably takes millions of dollars. Whereas before, even 20 years ago, you could start out with little and work your way into it. You can't anymore.
Right, because that's how a lot of guys did it. It was funny.
Oh yeah.
Like talking to Bobby Labonte the other week, and I said he built his own Busch team and won the championship in the Busch Series. And I said, was your hope to really get the exposure and then get picked up as a driver? And he said, well, you look at it, you look at Jarrett, you look at Earnhardt, they ran their own cars.
Yeah, they did in Busch. Yeah.
So it wasn't that you were just trying to get noticed and get a ride. It was you could build a team and do it yourself.
That's right. Got sponsorship. Yeah. And actually, when what's his name? His son's driving now in the Xfinity series. I'll remember his name in a minute. He's sponsored by selling T-shirts at the track.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
To make some money.
You're not thinking of Nemechek, are you?
No.
Okay.
Although I know Nemechek's pretty well.
Yeah.
I know Martha, the mother. She and I are good friends.
Yeah.
I'll tell you the nice thing about the Nemechek. I always have stories about everybody. and Martha and I are good friends. And she came to me and she said, "Would you go to the short track tonight? John Hunter is racing. It's his first time he's raced late models, and he's racing out there. And would you go out? It'd be nice if you could go out and see him, watch him. I said, sure, okay. And I guess he heard us talking or so. I don't know. Maybe he didn't. Anyhow, I went out there, and after the race, and he's only like 16 or something, he turns to his grandmother and he says, isn't it nice that man came out to see me race? I thought that was pretty nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you know why he's called John Hunter?
No.
Well, his uncle John was killed. Well, he got in a wreck at the last racetrack of the year, used to be, in Florida. And unfortunately, he'd lived for a week or two afterwards. And apparently, I thought that Earnhardt was a disgrace on the racetrack, but off the racetrack, apparently, was pretty good. He gave Nemechek his airplane to use to go back and forth to Florida from North Carolina, where they were, while John was hopefully going to recover, which he did not. So they named him John Hunter, so they don't call him John Nemechek. That's why he's called John Hunter.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So are you still flying?
I haven't flown for a couple of months. I've been too many things on the go. Every day I think I'm going to go today, and I just never got to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we had a story there, too. A few weeks ago, I went and got my medical, my aviation medical, and my aviation medical doctor, he says, son, about this guy 88. And I said, well, Phil, I'm 89, He says, yeah, that's right. He said, you're the oldest licensed pilot in Canada. And I said, or oldest licensed pilot. And I said, you mean in Ontario? He said, no, I mean in Canada.
Really?
Well, I don't know how he would know that. But anyhow, I said that to somebody, and they said that to Adam Ross. And on the races on, he's talking about the 98 car. And he said, yeah, and it's owned by Jim Bray, who's the oldest licensed pilot in Canada. I didn't say I was. I said that my doctor said I was.
Well, now you're going to get, if there is someone a year older, they're going to reach out to you.
That's what I said. I would feel a little uncomfortable in a way. I feel badly for some guy that's 91 years old and is still licensed, and happen to be watching the race on TSN and say that's not true.
Yeah.
But that guy's lying. Well, I wasn't. I didn't say it. I said I was told.
Right.
But it is pretty neat to be almost 90 and still licensed to fly.
Yeah. So no plans of shutting that down anytime soon.
No. Every once in a while, I think of, because I haven't flown for the last couple of months, and yet. It sounds kind of silly in a way, but I'm almost tempted to take somebody with me because I haven't flown for 2 or 3 months.
Right.
But
why not? Yeah. Probably not a bad idea.
But the old expression about old pilots and bold pilots and no old bold pilots. And that's why I'm concerned about your dad.
Why is that?
Because he's just learning to fly.
Yep.
And I'm guessing that the airplane he's going to use it to travel in business.
Yep.
And I hope he takes a commercial pilot with him all the time.
Well, he doesn't have his full license yet, so
even
he's
when
got
he
to fly
gets
with
his
a guy.
license. That's the scary part. Is the most dangerous pilot is one with 100 hours in a license.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I remember being at Guelph one time, and this guy took off, and I heard him on the radio, and he was leaving the circuit, and he announced Italy and so on. And then I saw him a month or so later, and I said, boy, it was sure nice to hear the way you were on the radio doing everything properly. And he said, I don't have enough hours to cut corners. He had about 30,000 hours with Air Canada.
Wow.
But the guys that cut corners are the guys with a couple of 100 hours.
Yeah.
And so I hope your dad takes a pilot with him long before he needs to.
Right. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What gives you so much energy and keeps you going? As far as the racing and all your endeavors.
I've been asked that question a few times lately, and I say I've never smoked. I hardly drink. So that's only 2. What's the third? I said luck.
Yeah, that's a component in everything, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good answer, because I think, people discount so much of. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. So much of what we put into our bodies, it's what we're made out of. What food we eat.
Yeah.
And
I've had a 34-inch waist for 50 years, and I've weighed from 160 to 170 for the same length of time. I'm
Right.
about 160 right now.
Right.
But I'm pretty lucky.
Do you drink coffee?
Not much.
Okay.
I've been drinking it lately because I go to, sometimes we call it the kindergarten or the university. The guys that meet at Timmy's in Canesville, they're in the mornings. I don't get up that early. And then in the afternoon from about 4 till 4:30. And I say, I don't know, I'm there for the education or the entertainment. But I did learn a lot. But and I'll have a small coffee then. So
Right.
I might have 2 or 3 small coffees a week, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. I went for years with none, like 50 years without any.
Right.
But but I think probably a lot of it is being mentally active. When you're running a business, even though it's not that big, I still sell a couple of hundred trailers a year, or
Yep.
100 trailers, 150, 200. And so I'm still mentally that way, and the airplane and the race team. And so the other day I'm driving out, and I'm coming along the lakeshore, or along the Queen Elizabeth, and I'm thinking, there's a guy that I knew that we worked for Fruhoff, and then he went into the trailer and truck business, and I wonder if he still has a place down there. And I'm driving on, and then I look and I see Kid, K-I-D, Kid. So then I said, oh, Ken I. Dwighty. That was the guy's name. And then I'm thinking, I'd thought about him forever. That's not a bad memory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a great answer to stay mentally.
Yeah, so I
active.
say to Pam, my third wife's very young. She's only 61, but I said, so I'm not with it. I'm not getting it. She said, okay, say it. Okay, FGA81BHQ 26065. That's the serial number of the only new highway tractor I bought in 1953. So she said, you can remember that, you're okay.
Yep. So that's the little code. Say it. Yeah.
Yeah, can I still remember the serial number of that truck?
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
So,
Well, I appreciate you coming on and having the conversation.
Now, good. And historically, we missed some of the stuff and some of the drivers, of course, including Malcolm Strawn, who's doing. If he could get sponsorship again, I'd run him. He's a superb.
He's great guy, great driver.
Great guy, and a great driver. Yeah. But did your dad start in business around the corner?
So he started in business
this way.
He started in business out of his driveway just when he was young. In Etobicoke.
Oh, yeah.
Just 15, 16, working on a car.
So you know who else did that? Roger Penske.
Right. A lot of guys did.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, I'm talking about successful guys.
Right,
yeah.
Right. And then his first shop, I think he was probably 21. And I know this because I just did a podcast with him and interviewed him. He was 20, maybe 21 or so, or 20, and rented a spot. I think you're getting a phone call there.
That's fine. Yeah.
Rented a spot by Toronto Airport.
Oh.
So a little 2,000 square foot shop.
Oh, yeah.
And then he ran out of space there, and in 91 he built on the fourth line. Just one line over around the corner.
On the
fourth line in James Snow Parkway.
Yeah, was there another guy involved with him?
No.
Well, seems to be I sold a guy. I took a race car in on trade on a trailer, and I ran it once, I think, and then it had a 327 350 horse, I think, engine or something, and the engine was apart, and I sold it to a guy over there. I wondered if it was your dad.
Maybe it was Neely. Was it Rob Neely?
No, it wasn't Rob.
Oh, okay.
No. But this place was on the west side of the road, whatever road that was.
Yeah, no, so he was on the east side.
Was he? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Near Neely.
Yeah,
Oh,
just
okay.
north of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so then...
Because the guy was dealing in Mustangs and Camaros and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, he was our neighbor who lived across the road growing up. He was a car dealer. Yep.
That would be the guy then. I can't remember his name, but I'm not good on names.
Yeah.
But Roger Penske's unbelievable on names.
Mm.
But, so, anybody can be successful if they've been given a bunch of money at the start or something. But I always had the impression that your dad started from nothing.
Yeah, definitely.
same as Roger did. He'd buy a car and fix it up and sell it out of his driveway.
Right.
Same kind of a deal.
Yeah, well, he's doing it on quite the scale, Mr. Penske.
Well, comparatively speaking, your dad's scale's pretty good. Your dad and your dad's scale, your scale's pretty good too.
Working on it. We don't have those chrome wheels yet on the haulers.
No, and when I saw like the cars that you're selling now, the Cobras, you get the odd original one, eh?
All of them.
Oh, they're not. Well, and I'm told that the left side and the right side on the original ones aren't exactly the same length. So if they are, it's not right. And there was a guy that was a superb body man, a panel beater from England, that worked his first job when he was learning how was building fenders for AC.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
And that's who told you?
Somebody told me that they're about an inch difference in length.
Interesting.
Because whereas the molded cars are perfect.
Right.
But
all the replicas.
The real if the real car, if it's not perfect, it's it's a real car.
Right. Well, I wouldn't say that. There's a couple telltale signs, but yeah, that's interesting. I'm not the resident Cobra historian. It'd be my brother, so I'll ask him. I'll ask him about that.
They had a race in '62, I think, at Daytona, a road course, but the road course went differently, and it went down the pit road and in behind what used to be the Goodyear building, and the car that won the race, I think, was a '98 Cobra.
Okay.
And green, I think it was color maybe.
It was number 98 Cobra?
I thought it was number 98, but it was a different track, went the other way. And I thought at the time, how can a car with a 289 in it beat the Corvettes with a 327? It can't be. But they did.
Lightweight
because
little
they were
car.
lighter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they lived longer, and like the cars lived because you were less hard on the brakes, on all the components.
Well, they were and not taking anything away from, but they were. You'd never known a way, but they were amateur drivers. In other words, they didn't get paid. Yep. So they go. I'll tell you, Ron Fellows is not happy with our series. There's too much body work, but damage. Although Sam gets the odd tire mark on the side of his car too. I don't know if you've ever raced against him much at all on the racetrack, but
not a whole ton really.
But he's never wrecked, but he does use up noses, but that doesn't take much. Yeah. Hardly anything, just a little tap. Yeah. And you got $1,000 nose to replace.
Oh yeah, it's not cheap when you start tearing up the cars, and I mean 300 laps on a little short track, you're gonna touch at some point.
Yeah. Unless you're Kyle Steckley.
Yeah, or if you're just right out front.
Well, no. Kyle Steckley, the Saturday night race. Yeah. And I'm a real Kyle fan. I sponsored him at his first year in mini stocks 3 years ago. He ran the whole year, never put a body panel on. Wow. And so I said, he's such a nice kid. I said, okay, I'm going to give you $50 for every top 3 you finish in the feature. I didn't know there were 2 features every night at Flamborough. anyhow, paying
good money.
Kyle started. He had electrical problems, so he couldn't time trial for the APC race on Saturday night. So they got it running. He started 29th, and he finished 4th. Not a mark on the car.
That's a good run.
And he's going to be on our series
full time next year.
Hopefully,
yeah. No, he should
guys
be
like
there
yourself
for sure.
and Kyle and Trayton. It's the future of the series. Really.
Yeah, I mean, we hope we can make it, make sense financially, and
well, I don't know how they only do that is to get
good sponsors,
a few $100,000 of the sponsors.
It's true.
Who's New Tech Wood?
New Tech Wood, they are a company. So we had the CEO come out at Three Rivers.
Oh, you did? Good.
Yeah, so they enjoyed it, and they do applications, really call it decks, siding of houses. Oh yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah. So how'd you do it at Trois-Rivières?
Man, we were running third there that whole green flag stint, and on the restart, Ranger and I got together and we cut the right front tire down.
We were running 4th.
Right, you were behind us.
But
Yeah.
all day.
Yep.
It seemed like all day.
It was all day.
Well, what happened was the car that won the race put him into the tire barrier, like in the early race. We went from 9th to 24th, and then we got back. We got back up, and then we did the fuel deal and
Yep.
ended up 4th.
Yep.
So we ran like behind you all day.
Yep.
And then Ranger finally got by him.
Yep.
And then what I understood happened was did you and Ranger get mixed up?
Yep.
And Ranger lost his temper, and on the restart he wasn't going to. This is what I feel. He wasn't going to spend another whatever number of laps trying to catch Sam and get by him. So he drove Sam and spun Sam. So Sam went from 4th to 4th or 5th to 18th.
Oh.
And then he got back to 13th, and the green-white checker, he's 13th in a green-white checker and ended up 6th.
Wow.
So he was as good as the guy that won the race.
Yeah, Gannett. Yeah.
You were probably better than the guy than him.
I thought so in my mind anyways.
Well,
yeah.
It's circumstances.
Yeah.
The guys that were better
Yep.
wrecked themselves
Yep.
or each other.
Yeah.
You know. So it was. But we went from 13th to 6th.
That's a good
in
deal.
2 laps.
That's the best finish this year then, right?
Best finish ever.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The best finish he had. Oh, and then we ran 9th at Mosport. So we had 2 top 10s, which, as you know, a top 10 now is like a top 3 or 4 or 5 a few years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Super competitive series.
Yeah. So you did it with, as I say, you don't need to change tires, and you did it with a Panhard bar.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
Fletcher and I don't agree about that. I say watch linkage is the way to go.
Right.
He
I
says
see what you're
Panhard
saying.
bar.
Yeah. No, we didn't take tires. I mean, I would have liked to. I think. I don't know.
It only makes a difference for very few laps. Mind you, if you take them at the end of the race, yeah.
Yeah. I think the good years it made sense though. I think the good years you needed to take tires.
Oh, you think there's a difference,
Yeah,
eh?
a big
Oh, is that
difference,
right?
I think.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
I think now you can get away with it. But compared to, it is only a few laps, but it's a second and a half new tires for that 1 or 2 laps.
For 1 or 2 laps,
Yeah.
yeah, which in a certain spot will be a big difference.
Yep.
I mean, a couple of tenths is a lot in our series. Now, it's a great series, isn't it?
It's awesome.
27 cars at the last race. I think we have 30 car fields next year. I think Tony's going to change the attitude of a lot of people.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope we're all on a level playing field and
Well, yeah, it's a level playing field.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the cheaters versus non-cheaters? Is that what you're talking about?
being politically correct.
I never have been. But at the dirt track, Robin was in the grandstand, and there was a bunch of dirt people sitting in front of her, and Robin Graham, and she said they were saying, we paid for it, so we might as well stay, but this is going to be a joke, these guys. They're going to be following the leader and cautions every 5 laps and so on, but we might as well stay anyhow. So I said, what did they say after the race? They said, she said they weren't sitting, they were standing at the last 10 laps, and she said they'll be back.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I think that race, I was questioning it, everybody was, but I think that it was good for the dirt track people because the people that follow our races that went to that race saw what sprint car racing is like.
Yep.
And the people that go for the sprint car saw what our races are like. So I think it's good for both. I think.
No, I agree. That it's fun to show up to a track that it's a wild card.
Yeah.
Same with Newfoundland, and that's what I love so much about the Toronto Indy race. Even though that it's a difficult, demanding track, no one gets to test there. No, there's no
That's
practice
right.
there.
Yeah.
You just show up and wheel it. So. We have one of the best series. The NASCAR Pinty series is one of the best series in the world.
Well, in the world,
competitive guys.
Yeah.
Certainly the best in Canada, and
the guys come up from down south, the hot shots, and they're okay.
Yeah. No, and it's tough to jump into any series.
Yeah.
You try and race against, a guy like DJ Kennington at Delaware.
Yeah.
Who's had
yeah.
a bazillion laps.
And, and DJ, when you think about it, you don't think of it until somebody mentions it, that he seldom wrecks. He drives the car like he has to fix it.
Yep.
He drives hard enough, but he still.
Yeah.
Yeah. The 1 year time out west, and he and Matthew ran side by side for a number of laps, never touched. And after the race, he came to Matthew. That was great racing, he said. We never touched. Of course, he said, I'm running a Dodge engine. And Matthew says, well, I'm running one of your old Dodge engines.
Yeah. That's good.
But DJ doesn't wreck much.
No.
And the guy that is the national champion, he doesn't wreck much either. He wrecks people a lot, but he doesn't wreck much himself.
Yep. Well, that's the only way to win a championship.
No, it's not.
No. I mean, not wrecking. You can't wreck.
Not wrecking. Yeah.
You can't finish. You can't have any DNFs if you're going to win the championship.
Yeah. Like Dumoulin, he had an off year this year, but last year he finished on the lead lap in every race.
Yep.
That's
the way to do it.
Almost impossible to do in every race.
Yeah.
So he was. But it's a great. I think they need to clean up the rules, the enforcement some, and the driving enforcement some, but that's just minor stuff.
Yep.
I think Tony will be good for the series.
No, I agree.
Yeah. He's such a positive guy.
Yeah, we're looking forward to being back next year. So, and I'm sure you are as well.
I expect to.
Yep.
Yeah. I hope I get Curb back again.
And when do you turn 90?
Oh, not till February.
Okay. So you'll be 90 for next season then.
Oh, yeah. Next season I'll be a 90-year-old car owner.
Will you be the oldest NASCAR team owner?
I think I am.
Okay.
Active. There may be, I don't know. At one time, Glenn's dead now, but at one time Glenn Wood was the car owner, but he wasn't active.
Right.
He wasn't. He was going to the races a bit, but he wasn't really active. Well, I don't work on the car either, but
well, you're active at the track. I see you running around.
I'm pretty active. Yeah.
Well, I apprate you coming out and spending the time to sit down.
There was other stuff we could have touched on, but I think we did a lot.
We'll do more. We'll do one next year. How about that?
I don't plan that far ahead.
Good. Yeah. Thanks for coming on.
Okay, thanks for having me.
All right. If you guys enjoyed this podcast, give it a rating and share it with some friends. Thanks. See you guys next week.